I get one of those?
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Yeah, man. The one that still sticks in my head is one from my hometown.
Well, the one out here was horrible, man. That
Yeah,
was just.
it was, man.
I can't believe that one. People aren't going burning the town down because of that.
Right. Okay, here we go. Okay, as promised, here it is.
Hello.
This is Bruce. This is my man, Ray. And we are both ex-cops. So we're going to talk about how we feel about what's going on. I don't really have an agenda. I have nothing written down. We're just going to talk about stuff we normally talk about, that when the camera is off. And my channel, just so you know, doesn't normally talk about these kinds of issues.
It's more technical stuff.
It's more, this one is actually relationships and stuff that me and you used to talk about. But right now, I don't feel like I could talk about anything else until I talk about this. And to be honest with you, this is not new. This is not a new subject.
No.
This is not new. Ray and I have talked several times about issues that happen in our own hometowns, about young black men getting shot, or boys, little kids getting shot, and not unarmed and everything. And it's really traumatizing. You know, one that I know everybody's talking about, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Aubrey, who, if you read those stories, it pisses me off. Like I gotta tell you guys, like, I'm mad. I'm really upset. But the one that got me was one from my hometown, Sacramento, on the same street I'm from. Kid got shot. They fired 20 shots at him. Shot him 6 times in the back, 8 times total.
20.
And
they fired 20 shots.
20 shots.
Armed or unarmed?
He was unarmed. The cops responded to somebody talking about somebody breaking out windows.
Okay.
Right, it was at night. Somebody was breaking out windows in the cars. They called the cops. Cops showed up. They see a young black man. He was 22 years old. He was at his grandma's house. The cops rolled up on him. He ran. Mm-hmm. He ran to the back of the house. They challenged him. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. He put his hands up. He had a cell phone in his hand. They shot him. They shot 20 shots, and 6 of them went in his back. And here's the crazy part about it. Initially, the cops, first off, they said, turn off your mic, and they start talking amongst each other, right? And then they changed up their story. Initially, they were saying one thing, but then when the footage got leaked to everyone, they had to tell the truth. And because of qualified immunity, I believe it's called, nothing happened to those police officers.
Never heard that term before.
Yeah, and that's how they get away with a lot of it. I just think that the police should be held accountable. And I gotta tell you, as an ex-cop, I was never taught to shoot people in the back. I mean,
running away.
Running away. How is that a threat?
Later. You can pick them up later.
And whenever I hear they were shot in the back, I'm like, how's that a threat to you? It's just like the one here locally in Colorado Springs. Kid was running away.
One of the worst shootings I've ever seen, by far.
What do you got to say about all this?
Well, just like when we have a buddy John we talked to about it, and he's done law enforcement both in the military, federal level, civilian. A lot of it comes down to training. I definitely believe that. I think we definitely got to spend money on training. We need to spend money on community policing. I know we hear that term, but if we got people who are assigned to neighborhoods and we say, hey, you need to, and I'm getting this, when I was in Iraq doing some low-level contract intel work for the Army, I worked with an older gentleman who was from Mobile, Alabama. We call him Grandpa. And he would tell us stories about how when he first came in, and he's in his 70s, I believe. He talked about how, he's a white guy, red hair, flaming red hair. And, the first neighborhoods he had to patrol were the black neighborhoods. But in those days, they would knock on doors. They would say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm out here.
Policing.
If you need help, call us." And it works. You get to know people. In America, we don't get to know people anymore. And we hear these excuses about, we don't have money, we have this. No, we have money. We just don't we don't prioritize it. We also, we're starting to look at people sitting in cars as occupying force instead of getting out there. And to me, it's good for the officer and it's good for the citizens also, because they get to understand, yeah, this is a guy or girl wearing a uniform, but you can come talk to them. They have families. They go through the same thing you go to. And I know when I got to being in the military, working a gate, anybody knows my first assignment, I was stuck on the gate for like a year. But the positive thing from that was I got to know everybody coming in and out of the gate. And I noticed when I got on patrol, like I remember one time we had like a riot at the club on base.
Yeah.
And I noticed, even though there were guys who had been in longer than me, the people were coming to me because I had a rapport with them, and that rapport may have just been, "Hey, how you doing? Have a good night,"
Right.
And they weren't giving the other guys information, but they were giving me information. So I know community policing works. There's no doubt in my mind. We have to stop. You got to start knowing your neighbors. You have to know what's going on. We got to talk to each other, and nothing's going to change until then. And if we got people who see other citizens as second class or anything like that, it's just never going to end. It's never going to end. People have to understand. I noticed this overseas. Sometimes I think we think people overseas, and I say this term, and some people may not understand what I mean by this, but we think that people don't love their kids as much as we love our kids, and there's a reason why we don't call people human. We'll say insurgents. We'll say Charlie. We'll say terrorists, because we don't want to humanize them, regardless of whether we agree with their tactics or not. And I think that's definitely part of the problem. I'm not condoning any violence or anything like that, but I have no doubt if we start, if we're saying, "Hey, we're going to put you in this neighborhood, these 4 blocks are yours, and you have a partner or a team of 4, and don't tell me we don't have the money, because all that money we send overseas, foreign aid, wars that really haven't done anything to benefit us, we have money, and nobody ever questions about, where's the money coming for this war or whatever." So I think, there's nothing wrong with spending money here in America and keeping people safe, but the us versus them mentality has to end. And if that doesn't end, we can hold hands and kneel all we want, but it sounds good.
It sounds exactly what you just said. Sounds like what Jocko said today on his. Did you see that?
No, but I like him.
Wow.
I like him a lot.
So what you just said is almost exactly what he said.
No, I like him.
Yeah, he's incredible. I just seen him today. It just popped up in my feed, and I was watching him. He said, "We need to humanize one another."
Yep.
Like even if it's the other side, if it's you're a cop and you're looking at these protesters, you got to understand these people have families. These people they have the same. We're more alike than we are different, And he said from the other side, if you're a protester and you're looking at cops, that cop has a life.
Yes.
If the second we humanize one another and see that we're all on the same team, like until that happens, like I don't know how far we're going to be able to get.
Well, that's why they teach you, if you get kidnapped, tell the kidnapper, get a dialogue with them. Tell them, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm married. I have 3 kids. Their ages are so-and-so and so-and-so."
Right.
And the belief is you're going to say something that's going to push a button and might be, you might have something in common with the actual hostage taker. But you're humanizing them so they don't just look at you as this thing in the, nameless thing in the corner. And then it makes them think like, okay, if I hurt this person, there's going to be consequences, not just for them, but their family members as well. And I always think about, and I don't know if it was Air Force or Army or where it was, but I remember it was a senior leadership, and it was about sexual assault. And they were breaking it down to where they're saying to the people in the unit, like, look, we understand that, we have in the military, for those who haven't been in the military, there's these rivalries that we have with other units. You could even be the same career field or whatever. It's just these rivalries that exist. Cause,
friendly competition.
Yeah, and basically they were saying if some guy tried to go and sexually assault your female, we'll just use a female teammate or somebody who's you serve with in your unit, like, you're not going to tolerate that. You guys are going to form a wall around her and you're going to protect her.
Right.
And it's like, well, we need you to do the same thing. And sometimes it needs to be somebody form that protective wall around somebody who's in your unit who may try and hurt somebody else in your unit. So if you think of the country as your unit instead of thinking of it as, hey, that's not my problem or I don't know them, I think you can get a lot of changes because it's going to affect you one way or another. Even if you think, hey, I'm not out there sexual assaulting people or harming people, but it can still affect you because, one, somebody you know could get hurt. That's number one. And number two, remember, you're going to feel the fallout because there's going to be some type of rules or some type of new policy change or something that comes out that may affect you.
Right.
It may affect you and it may affect the entire country, really, because if you look at what's going on with what happened, this cop knew you can't put your knee on the back the way he did, on his neck. You're right, and I can tell you, I've put a lot of people in handcuffs, and I put my knee on people's back, not their neck, and I used to be a lot bigger than I am now. And one also thing too is what really blows my mind is just and I know now they're realizing that some of the officers that were there were very, very new, so they didn't feel confident enough to try and get that sergeant to stop what he was doing, but there's evidence that some of those guys were trying to get him to get off of him, but they didn't go far enough, and they're gonna have to live with that for the rest of their lives. But I know, we know about accountability. Like, hey, your partner, I'm trying to look out for you, and I might have to, as we say, tap you out. So if you're about to snap or, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna grab you, and you might be mad at me at that moment. But you know something? I don't want the guilt. I don't want to live with myself for not grabbing you and trying to take care of you. Like you'll be mad at me right now, but later on you're gonna be like, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate you. I really appreciate you getting me. I was out of my mind. Blah blah. We got to have accountability. And there's this narrative. It's really wild, where I have another friend of mine, like we mentioned, my buddy John, and he'll post a lot of this stuff, and instead of people talking about the activity that they're witnessing in this video, they'll talk about, oh, you don't like cops. And it's like we go from one extreme to another.
Because he's a cop, he was saying that they are attacking him for posting videos about these shootings of unarmed black men. And he's a white guy. So his the people who follow him on Facebook, like, we're attacking him about it.
They're like, they're going after him instead of talking about the behavior. And it's like, well, wait a minute. And I always go with, hey, I got family, and I'm sure family and friends, I'm sure other people out there do too, who have done some things and ended up serving some time. And I love these people. I want nothing but the best, but it doesn't change the fact there's right and there's wrong. And what's scary is more people are trying to hold John accountable for a video than they are to talk about the wrong that's in the video. You're not a bad person if you address wrong. I mean, it's just, and this is how things like Nazi Germany and things like that happen, because everybody's going off of emotion instead of saying, come on, man, no matter what, there's no excuse for this behavior. It makes it worse when it's somebody who's supposed to be held accountable to a higher standard. Because in the military, what they say, when we're in cops in the Air Force, remember, if we did one of the same things as someone who wasn't a cop, it was looked at, well, you should know better because we expect more from you. Remember, and we were told that day one. So if you're a cop and you get caught stealing something on base, you're not necessarily going to get treated the same as somebody who works as a personnelist, or, they might be a mechanic or something like that. And it's a no-brainer. Wrong is wrong. And you don't have to stand up for somebody just because they wear the same uniform. There's been people in uniform who slaughtered people, all kinds of stuff. It's wrong. It doesn't matter what's going on. And I'm not gonna sit here and try and justify someone's bad behavior.
And they know it's wrong, because what they'll do is they'll try to attack the character of the person who's dead, so that they can justify him. It reminds me of the one cop female who walked into the wrong house. She was on the wrong floor. Yeah. I can't remember her name, but she walked into the wrong floor, and it looked like her apartment. She walks in, and there's a black man sitting on the couch. And then she's like, "Who?" She panics. She's like, "What? Who is this person?" And she draws her gun and she shoots the guy.
Yep.
Guy dies. So it was her fault. She went to the wrong floor of the house, of the apartment, went to the wrong room, went in, shot the guy, shot him dead. And immediately the media started trying to. Actually, the cops initially were like, "Yeah, well, we found there was traces of marijuana in his room on him." Then that reminds me of that whole sprinkle the crack on him
from Dave Chappelle.
From Dave Chappelle. I'm like, you're gonna assassinate the man's character? You shot this man, and he is murdered. You took a son away from his mother. You have murdered someone, and you're gonna try to assassinate their character because of something you did wrong.
You got to kill him twice. You physically kill him.
That's the same thing they're doing with George Floyd.
Yep.
Same. They can't do it with Breonna Taylor, the one who got shot from the cops walking in the wrong house.
She was an EMT, right?
I think she was.
She was an EMT. Yeah.
She was a first responder. They broke down the door, and then they were in the wrong house. They shot her, and then her either fiance or boyfriend jumped out of bed and he grabbed his gun and was like, "Hey."
Legally licensed firearm.
Right. They took him into custody, and now he's being charged with attempted.
No, the judge squashed. A judge came and squashed that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. They originally had him in there for attempted murder, but thankfully there was a judge who was clear-headed and said this doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And they all agree it wasn't originally. The news was saying it was a no-knock warrant, but they actually did knock and then came in, but they didn't identify themselves as police. And this guy. I mean, someone comes in your house. I mean, you're half asleep and you're coming up. What are you going to do? I know what I'm going to do. I mean, and this isn't the first incident. There's
going to get the strap
all the time where police officers went into the house incorrectly. They had the wrong intel, and they go in and people get hurt. And it's not their fault. I don't know who you are. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm not going to sit here and ask you questions either.
Right.
I'm going to write my name in the wall. So it's just that. To me, it shouldn't even. Some of this stuff, and it's funny because I think I told you there was a guy when I was in Kosovo, and most of the guys I worked with at the time were most of them were former like civilian cops, and one guy's name was Mike, really good guy, very very smart. He was our lead, and he was telling us how he was in Texas. He got loaned to a department one day, and so he's down at this other department, and one of the detectives said, "Hey, you mind taking a ride with me?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. What's going on?" And so they go, and they're actually serving warrants.
Yeah.
And my buddy Mike was surprised because they were just going up to doors and just knocking on the door. And he was talking about like when they go serve warrants, they'll take the SWAT team with them and a bunch of people. And he's like, "Nah, man, we don't do that." So what he did was they'd knock on the door, and if the spouse or somebody would answer the door, they said, "Hey, let Eddie know that we're I'm here to pick him up if he needs to." Kiss the kids and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. And my buddy Mike was blown away because he noticed when they treated them, and not everybody, but most of the people, when they go and not make them look bad in front of their families, their spouses, let them get a kiss in, he goes 9 times out of 10, they will go with them without a fuss. They would get in the car. If nothing else, he said, then they'd also thank them for not beating them up and coming in heavy-handed.
Right.
So he said when he went back to his department, he instituted that at his department.
Right. Within reason, I'm sure that there's violent cases
of course.
or whatever.
I mean, you got to know who you're dealing with.
Of course.
And if and Rob will tell you, anybody who worked with me, I'm not soft. So, I mean, when it's time to get down, they know who to call. So, but I also believe in common sense. We can reinvent policing in America where it's better for everybody.
Man, one of the problems is that you mentioned accountability.
Yep.
And that's the thing. Like, there seems to be no accountability when taking the one who, and I know you guys have seen this, where the old dude has a helmet in his hand and he's approaching the cops who are clearing the street.
Buffalo.
Dude just pushes him down, right? Dude's 84 years old.
Oh, man.
He goes down, and it's horrible to see. It's like that scene on Mr. Glass where the dude goes down the stairs and just breaks apart. Like, this
and
man
you see
is
the
84.
Blood
starts
out his ear,
gushing out of
like
his ear.
Kool-Aid or something. It just came out.
And it's like then one of the cops goes down to see if he was okay, and then they pushed him forward. No, go, keep going.
Yeah, a cop tried to check on him. Another cop tried to check on him.
Right, and there's no accountability. There hasn't been accountability. Like, normally, like, I believe those 2 cops were fired immediately.
Yep.
Right. But then all the 57 other responders there were like, well, they were just following orders, so we're out. We're not gonna act anymore. We're out.
Yep.
So I'm thinking to myself, there's no accountability. These guys are so used to no accountability. That qualified immunity stuff protects them so often that they're okay with a 84-year-old man damn near dying from being pushed to the ground. Like, that's not what I was taught. For use of force training, we got it a lot. And it seems like in the civilian world, first off, they're hiring people who are too immature and can't handle any kind of authority. So they get a gun and a badge and think they're freaking superhuman.
Yeah, they think they're
Superman.
John Wick. They got a Hollywood view of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the police department use qualified immunity to protect them. And then on top of that, the elected officials aren't taking action against the whole department.
Yeah.
And it's that trifecta of things I think that's happening that it's like a cancer. And these are people who are supposed to protect and serve our community. These are people who are part of our community. You cannot have a bad apple. It's just like in his special Tambourine from Chris Rock. He said, just like being pilots, you can't have bad apples. Pilots can't be bad apples. You can't have even one bad apple, or planes are going to go into the mountains. And yet you have cops that are bad apples. You can't have it. You just can't tolerate it, and you can't have it. You can't just hire anyone to be a cop. It is hard to be a cop. I really respect the job and the people who do it the right way, because it's a super hard job. It's not for everyone.
You get it from both ends. You get it from your leadership, and then you get
from
it from
your
the
customers
and the dirtbags on the street.
And from your customers who you stop for a routine traffic stop, and they want to give you, they want to cuss you out because you gave them a ticket. So being a cop is super duper hard. And I'm mad. I really respect cops. But the problem is our system. We have a systematic racism that allows this kind of thing to go on, especially to young black men, unarmed young black men. It's not right. It is not right. And I don't know. I'm so pissed off about this. The one that got me was Tamir Rice, who's from your hometown, who's a 12-year-old kid who got shot for a toy gun. They just jumped out the car and lit him up.
And the person told the 911 operator that it's a strong possibility that it's a toy gun. And when you've had use of force training, and I mean for years, and it's funny talking to people who've never had use of force training at all, and they try and tell you, oh, why can't they just shoot them in the leg, or why can't they? If you've ever done law enforcement, use of force, you know the answers to that question. It doesn't even make any sense. But also, when you're watching people, and some people may think that military training versus civilian training, it's all the same. I'll tell you that now. It's all the same. So the moment when you watch the video of that officer pulling that vehicle up Tamir Rice, and I've trained thousands of troops, people will tell you, I knew immediately, like, if you thought that was a real gun, why didn't you, at a distance, use your PA in your vehicle, get behind your engine block, challenge the young man, have him drop the weapon, put your hands up, turn away from the sound of my voice, walk forward until I tell you to stop, have him go face down. And no, they rolled up on him, and it wasn't even 3-4 seconds. Pop, pop, and this young man's dead. And a lot of this stuff, we're taught by one of the best. And so training, we believe in training. We know training works. But also, I remember being taught, you are customer service. That's number one. We were customer service, meaning we're here to serve. Sir, ma'am, is there something I can do to help you? You don't always have to bust people. And we also had people who empowered us when it came to officer discretion. And like I said, I understand I'm very lucky to have came in with the people and be trained and taught by the people and the leaders that we had. And sometimes they might not agree with you, but they would let you do it if it was within the confines of your authority. So they wouldn't come in there and make you look bad. But that's the thing. We have to, I think we need to go talk to each other. Everyone needs to knock on the door, because a lot of these things could be avoided. And I'll give you an example. Like something as simple as your next door neighbor playing loud music and you're trying to sleep. And, nowadays, someone will call and say, hey, I need you to come over here. And I remember when I was a flight chief and I used to tell my desk sergeant, I'd say, well, did you ask them if they went to their neighbor's house and gave them a courtesy? Meaning, okay, well, go next door. It's time for you to meet your neighbor. Go next door and say, hey, can you do me a favor? I got to get up early for work. My kids are sleeping. And show that respect, because one day you might be doing something and instead of calling the cops, they're going to come over and give you that same courtesy.
Right.
And we would always tell people that it's not a problem until you ask them to turn the music down and they refuse. And we tell them, if you refuse to turn the music down, then that's when you give us a call. Because then we can go and say, look, this all could have been avoided. Because according to your neighbor, they came over, asked you nicely, politely to turn the music down, and you didn't. And I know this sounds like common sense things, but a lot of people don't do it. And a lot of this stuff that happens, it's small. It's a very, very small little incident that blows up into a huge incident. And everybody has these phones and everything. So it doesn't take long. You guys know better than most. It doesn't take long for something to go viral. And I think that's really what we're losing. And you hear people older, we're in our 40s, who talk about neighborhood police. And it's kind of funny that even we talk about the racism in the past, people actually spoke to each other more than they do now. You know what I mean? So even if, people knew, hey, these guys are prejudiced or bigots, they know them. They've had conversations with them. They're not afraid to ask a question or stop by or something like that. And I think it's all about ownership. Take ownership of your neighborhood. Knock on the door. Say, hey, do you need something? I tell my neighbors, hey, please, especially I got some older folks, if you need something heavy lifted, just call me. I'll come help you. Give me your number in case I see something that looks kind of out of whack. And there's another one I remember. I can't remember the name. It was, I think, last year, year before, where the cops, I can't remember where, but the door to the house was wide open. So the neighbor called the cops, and I feel so bad for this guy. He called the cops, and then the cops came, and she was in the back, like watching TV or playing video games with like a little kid, and they shot through the window from the backyard.
Why would you?
And the neighbor, when they interviewed him, I felt so bad for that man because he's blaming himself. Because now he wishes that he would have went up to the door and kind of yelled in there and said, hey, is anybody home? Is everybody okay? And there was no consoling this guy, and I feel really bad for him. But again, that's just an example of something simple that we can do. I would do whatever it takes not to call the police, encourage people to solve issues by themselves. But I understand there's going to be a time where you got to call them. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But also, again, in the justice system, I believe in a lot of cases is about, in the O.J. Simpson case, I think illustrated this, is about resources.
No shit.
So I don't think it's a coincidence, the policing in, communities that are affluent is completely different than policing in areas where, they may be, lower middle class or, poor, low income. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely not.
So I think that's when we got to talk to each other, but got to get in there and talk, like make it a priority to know your neighbors. It has to be a priority. When we're spending all these billions of dollars, let's look at the money that we waste every year. We could take that money and you could go to these neighborhoods, have like a barbecue every 90 days. There's so many things that you could do to get out there and interact with the public and stuff like that. And as a cop, your life will be easier. Neighbors, they're not afraid of you because you're not some nameless person in a uniform in a car driving by, So, we're not going to figure out everything right here on the podcast, and a lot of these things have been said before, but for some reason we're not, we don't have the will to implement them. But you don't got to wait on government officials. There's nothing stopping you from knocking on your neighbor's door and saying, hey, here's my name, here's my number. If you ever see anybody around my house, look out, please give me a call. I'll do the same for you. That's easy. That's absolutely easy.
As a matter of fact, like there was a dude when I first moved here, there was some random dude drunk. He was walking around the neighborhood, knocked on our door, and we're like, who is that, right? All the lights are off, and I'm looking out, and then the dude walks across the street to my neighbor's house, and then me and my neighbor start I guess my neighbor called the cops. And it turns out the dude was drunk and got dropped off by his friends.
Oh, okay.
You know, and he didn't know where he was and
Okay.
stuff. So he was knocking on doors.
Well, I can see that happening out here.
Oh, man,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's all
So
dark.
me and my neighbor start talking. He was like, you know, we start chitting, just like you said, chit-chatting. And he was talking about he was a cop and he worked for, he was
Look
like
at
a
that.
deputy
Look
for
at
the
that.
police force. He
And
said
you have things in common.
Exactly. He said, I'm armed, and just informing me. And we were just talking, laughing and stuff about what had happened and stuff. And now I know him. He comes in and helps me mow my gigantic freaking yard. And he's a good man. So
And how hard was that? That didn't cost you a dime.
Exactly.
Didn't cost you a
then
dime.
they'll have like church when the churches were closed. We'll have church across the street.
See?
They let all of us know in the neighborhood, hey, everybody's invited to come. We're having church outside, but it was just a great gesture, And even if you may not happen to be religious, but the gesture was very
Yes. respectful,
and because of that, I feel much safer knowing who my neighbor is and stuff.
yeah.
And it's nothing to just be nice, you know what I mean? Just be polite. That's about it, man. But I was thinking to myself, like, why am I so angry? Like, I'm so mad. This has been happening for years. Like, for some of you guys, maybe it's new, but this has really been happening for years. And I was wondering why this time I'm so much more upset. And I figured it out. It's because normally when this happened, like when it happened with his name is Stephon Clark, that's the dude who died in my neighborhood.
Did you know him?
I did not know him.
Okay.
He was a very young man.
Okay.
He's 22. He's
generations.
generations
Long gone.
Yeah, generations removed from me. But it was something that got lit up in my neighborhood. My mom called me and stuff, and every time this stuff happens, me and my mom will talk to one another, and it kind of helps me to deal with it emotionally. And then that's it. I don't like to watch it because I just I get so mad about the whole thing, about the whole system, about everything. I don't want to get in that space. You know what I'm saying? So. This time it's different. Like there's played on every channel. It's being played on all social media, and it should be. I'm not taking anything from it. It should be, but I can't turn away from it. And because of that, I mean, it's necessary because that's the only way it's going to change. And I'm really, if there's anything that's good that can come out of this, number one is showing whose people's real colors are.
Yeah.
You're right. What side you lie on with this whole thing, what you really believe. It's coming out. It's senators, Congress, leadership, all the way up to the top. It's coming out. Who really cares about these issues? Who's really going to do something? And another thing is, it seems like since all of these giant companies starting to jump on the bandwagon, maybe there's a tipping point, and I really hope that there is. Another thing that I noticed is the generations. The generations, Gen Z seems to be really stepping up. Millennials seem to be really stepping up. They have a whole different mindset about race and stuff, and I'm pretty happy about that. They had a protest here locally. The police chief came out and marched with the people, and had all races there and stuff. It was really it's really touching to see it.
Yeah,
and
we've seen some things we've never seen.
I've never seen this before.
Yeah, I've never seen the police, because usually that was something that they weren't going to budge on. And,
Yeah.
I saw the one where I believe it was a chief of police in Chattanooga, and I was reading about, and where he looked at his people and he said, if you're wearing this uniform and you think what happened wasn't wrong, if you think that was okay, you need to turn in your badge.
Get the hell out of here.
I've never ever seen it like on this scale right here, and I just don't understand the whole, and my buddy brought up a really good point, and he says how everybody, when they're talking about something bad that happens involving, I'll preface the statement by saying, 99.9% of the police are doing what they're supposed to be doing. He brought up a good point. He goes, nobody ever does that when we're talking about like a politician. Like 99% of all politicians are doing what they're supposed to do. But he brought up a point too about the other officers who watched what's the guy's name, Floyd, George Floyd die. It's like, okay, so are all the bad people in the department all just happen to converge on that street at that moment? Like, why didn't somebody step up and say, hey, enough's enough? You may get embarrassed or feel you're embarrassed or this, that, and the other, but and that's what I think it is. And I remember I used to tell my troops, you've been trained, you know the difference between right and wrong. You carry firearms. Sometimes, later on, we were carrying two at the same time, a rifle and a handgun. And I said, it's one thing if you're messing up. It's one thing if you're messing up. To me, that's not the worst thing necessarily. To me, it was always when your peers, because I would tell them, you are empowered to do something. You're not going to sit there and just be a statue. So my problem is if one of your peers comes up to you and tries to tap you out and get you to calm down or relax, and you blow them off or you ignore them, I would tell my guys right there in formation every day, God help you. God help you. And I'd say, look, I'm going to tell you right now to your face. So when we're in the commander's office and the commander asks me, okay, Sarge, what do you think their punishment should be? I'm going to tell them, just like I'm telling you right now today, they need to go. They need to go. They can't be in this unit anymore. I don't want to work with them anymore. They're putting themselves and everybody else at risk, because it's one thing if you're messing up, but when your peers are trying to look out for you, and that's exactly how I look at it, because they don't. They can just stand there and do nothing like those other guys did. And you still chose not to listen to the voice of reason, then it's time for you to go. And we would just beat that through people's heads. But empowerment, I think, is one of the biggest things too. So it doesn't matter if you've been a police officer for 4 or 6 months. This guy's been here 15, 20 years. Hey, you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know what it takes to trigger them. You could end up saving a life by just getting in the way and just saying, hey, let's just go. Let's just take a walk. We're gonna let somebody else deal with that right now, and let cooler heads prevail. And I think that's really what it is, because there are a lot of people talk about, and it's funny, it's just like the terrorism thing. When they talk about why aren't these Muslims, they'll say like, why aren't you the good Muslims speaking out about
why aren't the
bad?
moderate Muslims
attacking
the radical Muslims?
Yeah.
And their answer is like, they're not Muslims. Like,
exactly.
Like, why didn't you stop the crazy Christian who shot up the
Westboro Baptist Church?
Right?
You know?
Should you apologize for them for all Christians?
It's ridiculous. It's one of the most ridiculous arguments I've ever heard.
Right.
You know, and because then what you're doing is you're placing everybody in a group, and you're making it seem like there's this collective or this hive, and the thought is a hive-like thought. But no, there's a certain level of pride, and there are bad apples. There are people who I know who never should have been in the military. There's people who, and it's like when I was talking to John, and I said a lot of people didn't do law enforcement. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I always think about that Cat Williams meme you see on Facebook forever, where he has that weird look on his face, and in the meme is like the look you give when your coworker acting like they're the manager or they're the supervisor, like giving orders. And that's how I, equate, for people who've never done law enforcement, equate people who are doing things like a bad cop. You got this person, everyone has that person at their job who they're just like, look at this. Like, what is this clown doing today? And then you're wondering why do they still have a job? And 9 times out of 10, long before that big incident happened, there are other incidents that were reported, but for whatever reason, somebody didn't step up and do what was needed to be done.
And that's what happened with the George Floyd case. One of the things that happens, that guy who killed him, who had his knee on his neck for over 8 minutes, that man right there had a rap sheet on him where all these people had to complain, like I want to say 18 times. And then the other guy, the Hmong guy, who's standing there watching, his face is plastered all over the internet too, the Asian dude. And he also had a rap sheet on him, and where he had a whole bunch of complaints on him. And did you know this? Like the Tamir Rice situation, those guys didn't get tried. Yep. They only got fired when they found out that they had lied on their resume. They had lied. They had a rap sheet from another place.
Yeah, one was about to get fired, and then a lot of times they'll quit before they get a chance to get fired so they can go to another department.
Imagine that. So this guy shoots a 12-year-old kid, kills him, doesn't have nothing happened to him until they found out, oh, you lied to us. You had something else going on at this other department. Now we're going to get rid of you. Yeah, something's wrong with our system, man. Something's wrong with it.
Yeah. In some places, it's fun.
Accountability.
I remember seeing in some places, it takes longer to be certified as a hairdresser than it does a police officer. And to me, training is just, there's no drawback to additional training.
It's so clear these guys don't have proper training.
Yeah.
When he pushed that 84-year-old man down, and I want to say it was Philly or New York.
It was Buffalo,
New York, yeah. And Who does that? And then didn't stop to administer. You can clearly see that this man is very old.
That's probably worse than the actual push right there. Was they saw he's bleeding out of his ear,
right?
And one person, knelt down to check the guy, and his partner grabbed him to push him on, and that right there just. And a lot of people, when I hear people, and they may not say this out loud or whatever, or people may think, hey, that's not my problem. You may think from a financial standpoint, hey, I live behind gates and I don't deal with people on that level. But it's like I tell people, even if you don't care what happens to black people or people of color, look, eventually they're going to get rid of all of us and they're going to come after you. And I've seen body cam footage of, and one of the really sad ones was
the white dude who was shot, he was having to crawl across the floor and stuff.
I saw that one.
You see that one?
Yeah, I saw that one. There's two actually. There's one in Arizona for a while there last year and the year before, had a lot of stuff going on in their departments, and it was, they pulled this the vehicle pulled, they made like a left-hand turn. I don't know if they signaled. I think that was the excuse that the officers used to make contact with him, but they actually were tasing him. They were tasing him on his balls. And they're tasing him. They're trying to pull the guy out. It's horrible, man. They're trying to pull the guy out. He's wearing his seatbelt. And his 10-year-old son's in the back seat. After all this craziness, because when they're pulling him, he's hung up in the seatbelt.
Yeah.
This 10-year-old kid had the presence of mind from the back seat to reach his hand over there and hit the release button so his dad wasn't in the freaking seatbelt, so the cops could pull him. And they were tasing him in his ball. It's on their video feeds. And I'm like, this is horrible. And I saw another one where an officer was planting drugs. He was doing traffic stops and he was planting drugs on people. I mean, you could see it clear as day on his body cam footage. And and these people, when he goes back and with these little baggies, and they have this look on their face, and these aren't wealthy people. These are regular Americans like everybody else, just trying to make a living. And this dirtbag was trying to make a name for himself by destroying them. And this one gentleman just breaks down crying, just like, in his mind, he's like, what is going on?
Right.
This is just insanity. And women were breaking down. And if it wasn't for the officers in his department, because he was new. So what happened was the officers who had been there a while were like, wait a minute, how is this guy just showing up here and he's getting all these drug busts? This doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So luckily they had the presence of mind to kind of start looking into things, and then they were able to, catch him. So if you think, hey, I'm not sitting here, wrong is wrong. I don't care what you look like. I don't care how much money you got. Wrong is wrong. And I don't care what jersey you're wearing. I don't care if you're a Republican. Don't care. People who know me, they'll tell you, don't care. Wrong is wrong. And I don't care if it's a black person doing it, a green person. Wrong is wrong. And I will not sit here and try and justify negative behavior under any circumstances. So nobody wins. Don't wait until it's, you, your sons, daughters, mothers, aunts, uncles, good friends fall victim to something like this. We got to hold people accountable. It's not just in law enforcement. It's our elected officials. It's everything. Wrong is wrong, and we can't compromise that. And if you think, like, for instance, like just outline those cases of white folks who are getting unjustly accused and arrested.
Or killed.
Yeah. I'm telling you right now, if you're thinking, hey, it's not my problem, eventually it will be your problem. It's just a matter of time.
If we let this slide, think about this. If this can go unchecked, you don't think it's going to happen to other communities? If this qualified immunity stuff can keep going on and they can continue to kill the lowest common denominator, you know what I mean? Like, let's be real. Like, we are treated as second-class citizens. We as black people are treated as second-class citizens in this country. If they can come after us and you think that it's going to stop with us, you're absolutely wrong. You're wrong. It's police brutality that this is shining a light on. So it's time for everyone to take action. Every single one of us to take action. Whether you do it protesting or voting locally. You got to vote for your local officials, not just the Senate, not just the presidency, not just your congressman. That means your local judges, your commissioner, your local departments. is where you have to start.
I would argue that's way more important because that
Absolutely.
affects you on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And these aren't no-name people. These are people's offices you could walk in tomorrow. You know, these are people who, you know, you can go to City Hall, meetings and things like that. So it's just, I know people talk about getting involved, and I know life's not easy. You got to work, you know, you got kids, you got bills, you got stuff. And some of these people, I think they count on that, that we're not paying attention and things are sliding. But it's like, don't wait until it's a family member. You know, wrong is wrong, period. It doesn't matter, you know. And you can't justify it. You can't justify putting a knee. It doesn't matter what the guy did 6 months ago, 10 years ago. He didn't deserve to die. He didn't do anything to die. I mean, that's
Right.
ridiculous.
And then, like, another argument against that, how basically they're assassinating George Floyd's character. They bring up his past and all the stuff he did, just like they did with the dude who got shot with Stephon Clark. They did the same thing with him, saying that, oh, here's his rap sheet, here's what he did, look this area he's from, all that kind of stuff. Like, the thing is, the cops didn't know any of that stuff when they showed up, right? And even if they did, think about it, if they knew George Floyd had been in prison, he'd done this, he'd done that, and they went up to him and just murdered him, that's first degree murder. That means it was premeditated. That means they like, there he is right there, let's roll up on him. Thanks. And then they killed him. Like, that's premeditated murder. They did not know that that man did anything wrong, you know, except when they walked in. And did he do anything wrong? I think it was a counterfeit 20.
Or was it a bad check? Like trying
counterfeit $20 bill.
I mean, nothing that's, you know, equals the death penalty out here. I mean, regardless, you know what I mean? So, and that's what gets me. It's like, okay, why are we, and you have conversations again with people who've never done law enforcement, but I mean, come on, it's common sense. I mean, no one deserves to die if they didn't go kill somebody. But even then, you know, that's my opinion. In a court of law, that's not even how I said it actually works. You have to prove it. And if your life's in danger, and again, I've yet to see where some of these individuals, their lives were in danger. If somebody's running away or something like that, you can pick them up later. We do it all the time. That's what, you know, APBs and BOLOs and things like that are for. We'll go hunt. We'll find you eventually. Exactly. We'll find you. It's just a matter of time eventually, or you're going to come find us. And that's what I don't understand. It's like hearing people try and justify even when the Eric Garner in New York selling Lucy cigarettes, and I remember
just about to mention that one.
I remember I was talking to one of my buddies who, same thing, served in the military as a police officer, but also did it in the civilian sector. And on Facebook, he was showing it, and you know, I got into, I guess, one of his friends, and he goes, well, what if he would have sold one of those cigarettes to kids? Well, number one, if you go and look at the case,
does that justify murder?
Yeah, he wasn't selling. They had no evidence that he was selling loose cigarettes. But I said, okay, when you were a kid, and I'm old enough to remember where you could just walk in somewhere when they had cigarettes in the machine, and you could get it. But regardless of that, I'm like, you're telling me when you were a kid you couldn't get cigarettes. You're telling me you couldn't get a pallet of cocaine if you had the money. You can do it. But what I told him was, and if you actually take the time to look a little bit deeper, that incident should have never happened. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if we look at it, because a lot of times we gloss over things, we don't go and do the history on it. The reason why in New York at that time, like a pack of cigarettes were like $15 because they taxed it so high. So what would happen, and I think a carton was over 100. And if anybody's out there who from New York, you can school us up on that. And so people would go out of state, get them, come back, because what happened, like it's like Ron Paul used to always talk about how these politicians will pass these laws or policies that sometimes what happens is it creates a void in the market. So that's where these guys, these street hustlers, come in.
Go to Philly, buy some a carton cheaper.
There you go.
Go and flip it for $60 on the streets of New York. Sell some Lucy's.
There you go.
That would be the best, because each individual cigarette you're charging $5 or whatever.
And the crazy thing about it is, these guys. So what happened? They created this task force. Think about this. They created this task force of NYPD cops to
do nothing
shut down people selling loose cigarettes. I mean, come on. And people don't even realize.
Who was the mayor at that time? Was it Giuliani or was it?
No, I think it was the rich guy. Bloomberg.
Bloomberg. Yeah.
I think it was. I could be wrong. And like I said, if somebody's out there from New York, please correct me. But I'm sitting here and I'm just like, you guys, like, it's just the same thing as we saw with prohibition and we see with the prohibition of drugs now.
Right.
It's like we don't understand that. Yeah, as bad as these things are, what's coming after that, just an enforcement, is just, it just creates violence. And history has shown that. It's not just me. It doesn't mean I want people on drugs or anything. But if you look at history and you actually take the time to look at it, you can only come to one conclusion: is we can do better. And this guy, I mean, a loose cigarette, not like a carload of cocaine or something like that. A loose cigarette.
The irony is insane.
Yeah.
Because they raised the taxes on the cigarettes to save people from cancer.
Yeah.
Right? But yet this man who's selling loose cigarettes gets choked to death. That's where I Can't Breathe.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the original protest on I Can't Breathe came from. Eric Gardner getting choked to death by the police.
Yeah.
And it just makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You know, common sense ain't common. And I think we just got to sometimes just say, hey, enough's enough. Come on, guys. I mean, is it really worth it? Some of this stuff is just not even worth it. It's just not. And eventually, that's where you get this us versus them mentality. You know, and even the people who get out of that, you know, you see these athletes, entertainers, people who grew up and seen some bad things, experienced some bad things, or have relatives do, and then even if they get money, that stuff still goes with them. They still see this. And we're not woe as me people. We're not those guys. We're not here saying, oh, you know, some of these guys aren't dirt bags or didn't do anything wrong in the past. But what we're saying is none of that warrant, you know, getting killed. There's things called due process.
In some cases, like, it's just straight up murder. I don't know how else to put it. It's just Sandra Bland. Did you see that one? The footage of that?
I still don't understand how we're not talking about that. I don't understand
Sandra Bland.
how.
If you didn't know, like, this was a black woman who was driving. She got routine traffic stop. The cop came up to her window. Can I see your driver's license? She starts to grab it. She gets it. Then he says, "Put out your cigarettes."
Yeah.
She's bitching the whole time. She's like pissed off.
Oh yeah,
She's like, "Why did you stop me?" She lights up a cigarette. She starts smoking. He's like, "Put out your cigarette." She said, "No, I'm not putting out my cigarette. I'm inside of my car." And he said, "Get out the car." She's like, "No, I'm not getting out of my car. What did I do wrong?" He yanks her out of the car, puts her on the ground. She starts screaming. She's like telling him, "Hey, look, there's something. I have a medical condition." He's on her back and stuff. Ends up arresting her, and they arrest her, and then she ends up dead. Right? Mystery is, who knows why she died? Nobody knows. Nobody's asking.
They said she committed suicide in her cell or something like that.
I don't know.
Like, it's weird how it just went away. It's just really strange.
Suddenly she's dead, and it's like, what did she do to warrant being killed?
Yeah, Dylan Roof shot up a bunch of people in a church, and they took him to Burger King afterwards on the way to the jail.
You ever see the memes where they show Dylan Roof being talked to and being gently handled, put handcuffs on him, and then them with their knee in the neck of somebody like George Floyd? Here's a guy who shot up a church.
Yeah.
He's
people were praying with. He killed people who were moments earlier.
Right. And tried to pray with him. Try to pray with him to get him to stop. And the cops show up and they're like, "Hey,
that guy was,
sir, can we put some handcuffs on you?"
I wouldn't mind a Whopper.
I'm like, wow. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say, man.
Yeah, it's gonna, you know, something in 2020. It's just crazy how this stuff is, you know, still going on, and how and it's funny. Like I said, some things that have changed, I don't think they've changed for the better. Some things I think have never changed. But it does seem like, you know, years ago, especially when we were kids and before, it just seemed like people spoke to each other more, you know, just.
Okay, I got a few people commenting here. Let me see. Somebody said, we had thousands of peaceful protesters here in St. Louis. First time ever majority of protesters were not African American.
Nice.
But concerned citizens and voters here. That's incredible.
Nice.
I've been encouraged by that. That's given me a ray of hope, and all the stuff that's been going on. That I'm seeing so many people all over the world. Did you see in London where they ripped down a statue of a former slave owner and threw it in the ocean, hollering Black Lives Matter? There's another one in Iran. Yeah, do you see the painting in Syria where somebody did a picture of George Floyd?
Oh wow!
Saying rest in peace and stuff. And then there's some in Korea, some marches there, some in the Philippines.
Yeah, Ireland.
Yeah. It's insane. Like I'm glad that people are starting to take up the mantle and stop calling BLM terrorists. You remember they were calling them terrorists? They were calling them terrorists.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do worry when I see certain groups being co-opted by politicians and people with corporate interests, people with money.
What is your personal opinion on what's happening with the rioters? Like, what do you think that's coming from?
Oh, remember I told you years ago. I remember there was riots, and I told you that there are people getting paid to riot. That's a fact. That's not even. It's easy to prove.
Do you see Joe Rogan where they were somebody had placed rocks around the sides
bricks,
of the road?
That's really strange. Like it's perfect. It's like if you order them from
They're
Home Depot,
exactly
and a truck comes
placed.
and just drops them off. There's a cone. They even put the cone for the car so you can go around.
Right.
And it's in cities throughout America. So I know it sounds like some conspiracy theory stuff, but it's just
something's going on. It's really
downtown
strange.
and there's no construction going on. Like, why are those? That's
really
stuff
strange.
that goes to a house.
Right.
Why would that be on a street? I don't know what to say about that. So if you guys got something, please let us know.
You see the one dude where the umbrella man, where he was going through. He was masked up. He had a hat on. He had a black umbrella, all dressed in black. It's a tall white guy. He's going breaking windows at Target. Some black kid comes up and is like talking to him. You can't hear him. It's off camera. The voice is off camera. But he's like, hey, he's trying to stop, and he breaks another window, walks off, and they're like, hey, that's a cop. That's a cop.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the case, but
happens.
It was very, very strange. It was very strange that this guy is how he's dressed, how he has an umbrella in the broad daylight. It wasn't rain or anything.
Or you see them wearing official, 5'11" cargo pant, issued, obvious some type of police or military issued. The boots, the black jacket, and it makes perfect sense. If you got to have probable cause. So if you send some of your own people in there to start smashing stuff, then they all run out. You know what I mean? And then that's a probable cause for you to go in there and quell that disturbance.
Right.
So, there's too much history out there, and I'm not saying it happens in every case, of course, but there's too much history out there, world history, that you can look up and you can see this stuff happens. It's not
kind of like a false flag.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly what it is, and it makes but the bricks thing, I'm still trying to figure that out. Like this neat, it's just so nice and neat on the side, like in the in the path of the protesters,
right?
And it's like, well, you don't think they're not? So in some of these places, there has to be security cams on the buildings, the traffic lights, and stuff like that. We may never ever, get to see those, but it'd be kind of nice to kind of tap that and see what's going on. So any of you guys, QAnons or hacktivists out there, that'd be kind of cool if somebody had that or was able to
let us know what's going on.
That would be dope.
We got 23 people watching. We're going to end this really soon, but I'm going to try to look for some good commentary. Mr. Thal says, I was listening to a police officer yesterday saying that there's too much warrior mindset in many police departments.
I've heard that.
When it should be a protector mindset.
Yes,
I agree.
A customer service. Great point. I've heard that years ago, and there's a really good interview, especially after the whole Freddie Gray incident in Baltimore. I believe the officer's name was Michael Wood, and he did I know he did a few interviews, but he definitely did one that's awesome on Joe Rogan's podcast a few years back. And he was also former Marine Corps, and he talks about the exact same thing that you just pointed out. And he says he noticed that a lot of the people who didn't have the additional training that he and some others had, being in the Marine Corps, being deployed in war zones, were a lot more trigger happy. But also, he talked about watching them. They would go get these drug dealers off the corner. A couple days later, another whole group moves in, and he talked about how he started to wonder, like, this isn't working. This isn't working. And also he started to look at them because he said in the wintertime, they'd be out in the projects, and so in the projects they would have the power on all year round, so the utilities. So they'd go break into one of the empty project apartments, and he would observe. He could hear the neighbors on each side talking. He could watch. He talked about how he, looking out the window, he watched a drug dealer as his a car pulled up and a lady was getting out with a baby. It was the drug dealer's baby. He was shooing his fellow drug dealers away because his baby was coming up. They respected that, went in the other direction. He sat there with his kid, and that's when we talked about humanizing, because that's when he started to see these people in this ghetto and this project as humans. You know, he's listening to them talk about daily problems, you know, just like any other human being would. And it's either we're all on the same team or we're not. You know, let's not pretend. And if somebody gets hurt, regardless of what they look like, where they're from, it affects all of us. You know, absolutely. All of us. And, you know, if we stand up for injustice or turn a blind eye, we deserve what we get.
It would be really cool if America we could see ourselves as a team, you know, but I feel like sometimes...
Which we do. When the Olympics come, we do. You know,
there have been times when we've pulled together, like 9/11. I remember that. It was an incredible feeling. Olympics, some sports kind of bring us together. But like sometimes it seems like we're just economically, where it's a caste system economically. It just seems like that, and I don't know what to say, man. I hope that things change, but I don't know that it will. I don't know that it will. I mean, I'm hardened and I'm hopeful because I see all people from all walks of life and all colors and shades marching right now and stuff, and that's cool. But if we don't take action like legislatively, if we don't put some political will and light some fires under these people to change the laws like qualified immunity, nothing will change. Nothing will change. We'll be marching like this next year and marching like this year after next, and nothing will change unless you guys vote.
And also, you don't have to, you know, sometimes, you know, we make things so big, it becomes overwhelming. But there's little simple things you can do. There's simple things you can do. Just help your neighbor, you know, golden rule. So we don't need, you know, anything else. Just golden rule. Treat people with respect. If you see somebody needs help, please offer it to them. I mean, it's as simple as that, or little simple greetings. I know, just saying, hey, good morning, good evening, good night. Just, you know, hey, I'm a human, you're a human, and if you need anything, hey, I'm over here.
Right.
You know, and the closed mouth don't get fed.
Somebody said, Bruce, you guys like you never make the news and doesn't make headlines. You know, actually, you know, I've been seeing like a lot of police chiefs step out, marching with the people and stuff like that. I've never seen what is happening right now. Especially the cops marching or kneeling
not on
with
this
people
scale
and stuff like that.
No, yeah.
And then I know like a lot of stuff's happening. We just mentioned the 84-year-old man getting pushed down and have his head cracked open. His head was cracked. So there's definitely bad stuff happening right now. People inciting violence on Twitter. I don't have to name any names. You already know what you already know what I'm talking about. It's happening. Somebody said, I'm a single white guy and I just wanted to thank you for talking about this. You know, for me, it's therapeutic. I felt like I needed to talk with some levity. You know what I mean? This man has been doing law enforcement way longer than I have. I got out of it a long time ago, but him and I have been talking about it, and it just doesn't make any sense. You know, so I thought maybe we would capture it on camera, and maybe we can do something like this again sometime. Somebody said, read the book Death by Government. Somebody said, what's up, gentlemen? Been a minute, Bruce. Somebody said, I'm shocked to. Okay, I can't understand what you're saying there. What do y'all think about Christopher Donner?
Was that Christopher Donner? I don't think I know that name.
And I think that's it, guys. I want to personally thank you, Ray, for joining me, man. I appreciate you, man.
Well, thanks for letting us finally come out to your house after 17 years.
Appreciate you, man. I did this was for very selfish reasons. I wanted some therapy for myself. I was feeling extremely angry. I still am, but I feel a little bit better having talked about it.
Mob mentality strong, man. I mean,
I understand why.
That's why you see people, normal, level-headed people, get out. Things happen. You get out around a bunch of people, and it's just like being at a ball game.
Absolutely right.
I've been there.
I know. Yeah, I know.
And you're at you're rooting for your team.
There's an energy, just like an energy just surges up, and you just, you know. So
and there's levels of accountability. And wrong is wrong. And you know, I was going to attending, and I still do a Christian Christian university, and it's funny, we'll have discussions. And one thing I've figured out over the last couple of years is there's some things in the past that seemed like it was, black and white as far as right and wrong, and now it's weird because we can't really agree on what's right and what's wrong anymore. And as strange as that sounds,
so weird.
And it's just like and treating human beings with respect is just that. When I was in Iraq, I remember there was, and I'll wrap this up. Is anybody's ever been to the Middle East or somewhere really hot? It's well over 100, sometimes 120 plus.
Yeah.
And I would take out cold water to people that, to Iraqis who are waiting, and some other people waiting to come in and talk to us so they can try and attempt to get a job on base. And I remember I walked out there and I was handing people cold water. And when I came back in the building, I remember this soldier basically said, well, you don't got to give them any water. They're just Iraqis. And I'm sitting here, and that just really just blew my mind, and I'm sitting here thinking a couple of things. One, they're human beings, and some of them were elderly. And I said, well, I don't think like that. That's not how I was taught, and these guys, you have to understand, these guys are out there in the heat, and we're going to come bring them in and try and talk to them and possibly get some information about a terror attack or something like that could, save the lives of people, soldiers in uniform on base and other people. And something as simple as a gesture of cold water. And when I said that to him, his sergeant, they kind of eased down when I said that. I think I made him feel guilty when I said that. And she said, well, we don't have enough water. I'm trying to work it so their sponsors have to bring them water. And I said, I hear what you're saying, but until that happens, if I see a human being outside in 120 degree heat, because they're not in air conditioning or anything like that, I said, why do we have to wait until one of these people dies of heat stroke, and then this base commander has to explain to the sheikh or whoever why this person died? And that right there, just letting this elderly gentleman, somebody's father, grandfather, uncle, pass away, that can cause an attack. Just that by itself, that's where Al-Qaeda and these other groups come in and say, look what they did. Your grandfather wasn't a bad man, your father wasn't a bad man, and they couldn't even give this elderly man a cool bottle of water. And it's something as simple as that can change people's lives or their outlook on you.
Right.
So, and I didn't do it for a prize. It's just like if I was in that situation, or my father or my loved ones or friends, I would hope another fellow human being would say, sir, man, would you like something cool to drink in 120 degree heat?
Like a simple gesture like that stimulates community. Like you're reaching out to them and saying, listen, man, like we're both humans, here you go. And that simple gesture might have turned away an attack.
Yeah, I'm trying to ease your suffering. And I understand that there's people who are supposed, and there's times where I would tell these guys, their sponsors, are you going to bring them lunch? Or they're going to sit out here? Because sometimes they'd be sitting out there, I'm telling you, 6, 7, 8 hours or more. And I would have to basically tell their sponsors, well, we're not interviewing any of them until you go and you get them lunch. And that's the only reason why they did.
They said Chris Donor was the LAPD cop.
That's who I thought it was.
Who went on a crusade against
they burned him. They burned him alive in a
We were just
cabin.
talking about the other day.
Yeah, I forgot his last name. I thought that's who you were talking about. I don't know a lot about it. What I do remember is some of the things that he said.
Knew too much.
Because he was talking about some of the people in leadership were some of the same people who were involved in the Rodney King incident. So I think the whole thing was really crazy, and I felt bad. Remember I was telling you about there were like those Hispanic ladies who were in like a blue, like a vehicle that kind of looked like his, and they were dropping off newspapers. And the cops were so trigger happy, they just started shooting into the vehicle without confirming that it was actually his. So, yeah, I don't know a lot about that, but I promise you I will go and I will look it up and try and find out a little bit more about it.
That good old boy stuff needs to stop, man. I mean, cops have to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And that is just as simple as that.
Yeah.
So
that's why it needs to be people from your community, from your neighborhood.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they're less likely to do something because they know they have to go back to that community.
Exactly.
And one thing that we talked about when you watch a lot of the old documentaries and current documentaries on the the civil rights movement, it was refreshing to see some of those leaders say they made a mistake back in the 60s when they're so anti-cop, but what they should have did was they should have been encouraged men and women in those communities, especially communities of color, to become police officers. Not saying that that would completely erase what's going on or stop it, but I think it would greatly reduce it.
It would have been a great mitigating factor
to
reduce
absolutely
the level of tension that's going on if somebody who you knew from high school is now a police officer going through the neighborhood trying to help out and serve the community, you know, and not going this, like you guys said, a warrior mode, want to be a Billy Badass.
And we need more. We need more, because even in the Air Force and in the other branches, you know, you're working these long hours. It's no different than the outside. The divorce rate is extremely high for cops everywhere on planet Earth.
It's hard.
So, and I remember when we first came in, they're trying to get people to become drill instructors, and one of the things, and that was another career field where there was a lot of divorce, and they're purposely trying to restructure it to put plenty of people in there, so to help reduce that, so you can spend more time at home. So I think if we say, hey, instead of sending all this money overseas to people who don't know our names, you know, our tax dollars, we go and we increase the size, put 2 officers per vehicle, and make it a community policing a priority. But also, you don't want cops, you don't want people who carry weapons working 12, 14, 15 hours a day for 5, 6, 7 days in a row. You don't want that. And it affects them. And, you know, if they're having a bad home life and then you think they're going to be able to translate that to the job and just turn into a totally different person, I'm sorry. And I'm willing to bet. And the guy who, I can't remember the name, the guy who killed Mr. Floyd,
I don't remember.
His wife, just a couple days after he got charged, filed for divorce. So
and then changed her name.
Yep. Oh, I knew that was happening.
Yeah, changed her name.
So I'd be really curious to see.
I don't know that guy.
I'd be really curious to see like what his home life was like. You know, no excuse. There's no excuse, but there's things that we can do to help each other. Because again, if you got a cop who, you know, they have a balance, they have a work-life balance, that helps all of us out. It helps that officer out. It helps, you know, us when we're out having a conversation or interacting with law enforcement.
Absolutely.
You know, and, you know, maybe we should do a class, like you said, you do instructional videos. I remember where I do, like in ALS, Amateur Leadership School, and they have you do one on your job. I did one on how not to get a ticket. And and it's funny because not too long ago, I was with my daughter, and I was speeding like crazy, and I don't know why, and I saw the cop, and I knew I was busted. So I just pulled over. He came, and before he came, he approached the vehicle. I looked at my daughter, and she was like, I think, probably like 8, 9, 10, or at the time. And I said, I bet you your daddy don't get a ticket. And she just smiled, and he came up. Guess what? I didn't get a ticket. I don't get tickets. So maybe I can give a class on how not to get a ticket.
We'll talk about that offline.
All right. Thanks, guys. Awesome. Have a good night. Take care of each other. Be easy.
All right, guys.